Okay. Hello. Welcome to another
Hello.
episode of the podcast. We're here, same cast as always. The
Back at it
lovely
again.
Kalani is here, and the less lovely Bryan is here.
Stop.
And we're just here uh to talk about some updates. And you know, w- we wanted to have, or at least I wanted to have, like another guest here to talk about the elections, but uh things are kind of weird, and we could kind of get into that because the elections, even though it got called literally days after we recorded our podcast, I think a few weeks ago at this point, um although it's been called, uh we're in a we're in this nightmare scenario where this president that we have currently is not conceding.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, not conceding, and they're being blocked from doing anything from the transition team, which it's just kind of a bit crazy. So we're gonna do some updates about the elections. We're gonna talk a little bit about the holidays, because Thanksgiving is coming right up, and then right after that is Christmas. So, and w- all the plans that we had last year, or all the traditions we had years before, it's kind of up in the air at this point. And so we're
Yeah.
gonna get a little bit into that, and hopefully, um we get a chance to talk a little bit about anime. Not a lot. It's not. This is not going to be an anime podcast today. This is another Brian Kim podcast, but hopefully, at the end of it, we could have a little chat here and there. But I guess let's just get started a little bit on something that's not super happy. So the holidays. So I've I've gone to the conclusion right now that I think I'm probably gonna spend Thanksgiving at home, and I'm not gonna be make the trek out to Nevada to see like my nieces and nephews, which kind of sucks because I do like enjoying them, seeing my sisters, and seeing their families. But I think it's probably best knowing that they have family, and my other sister, they have an extended other family from my brother-in-law that lives in Nevada, and of whom are at the age range that's like super not great. So I'm just like, it's probably not worth it this year. At best, it's probably more worth it to just kind of stay at home and maybe just make a call.
Yeah. Yeah, I get you. I get you.
How has like holiday planning gone for you?
I'm planning to eat Thanksgiving dinner at my aunt's house, which is normally what I end up doing for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how to how it's kind of like you have like your own certain like quarantine group like
Yeah,
you see very consistently.
yeah.
And I think my aunt, my little cousin, and my uncle are all in that same category.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like they come over to my house like every Friday, and it's been like that for a long time. And so we were talking about having a dinner just to like you know casual dinner like we normally do for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only other thing I know that I have coming up is a work dinner for Thanksgiving, which is also pretty normal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the like normally we have it for Christmas, but I think they're having it for Thanksgiving this year because work's been a little bit weird. And
Yeah.
currently, I think my work is planning to reopen,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like asking my boss because my boss is a lot older than I am. She's probably like in her late 50s, early 60s, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was asking her like, "Hey, how do you feel about reopening like to let people into the store because or well, I don't think you know because I never really mentioned it, but um for the duration of COVID until now, it's been just curbside. So we've had nobody walk in at all and it's just
Yeah.
been closed. And so I asked her, and my boss was saying how she got a lot of complaints recently about people who are like, "How do you expect me to go Christmas shopping when I can't look at the stuff that I'm buying for as gifts and stuff like that. And so also a lot of the other stores that are under the same company as the one that I work for, they've already reopened their stores for in-store walking and stuff like that. So she was really considering doing that at least for the holidays, but with the recent spike of COVID and how it's like we never really got out of a wave, but it's like our third wave of COVID,
Yeah, it's
you
a roller
know?
coaster.
So
Yeah,
so it does make me a little bit on edge. Granted, I like me personally, I am a little um complacent about it, which is horrible. Like I shouldn't be, but there's so much news coming through my head now that I'm just like,
yeah.
just another day of
Does that come from like COVID fatigue? Because to some degree I feel like I've been feeling it too a little bit, like the COVID fatigue. I miss being out with friends on weekends and stuff like that, and I totally get that. But at the same time, I also know that my friends also have like grandmas and like
yeah.
aunts and uncles that are like of age, and I'm just like, you know what, I also don't want to be complicit in killing
Like
someone's
this is for the
parents.
best.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, as much as I'm gonna miss doing like friendsgiving and like usually around this time I would be planning and prepping and doing all of that stuff for
Yeah.
friendsgiving, and like thinking about doing like a um gift exchange around December, but like it's just hasn't really panned out this year. And
Yeah.
so it's like, even for like one of my personal traditions, like I for me and my brother, we go to Knott's Berry Farm together. I just have like a brother's day off and just be like, you know what, we're just gonna
I
spend it.
mean, you can still go to Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah, which also surprising too, because it's like every okay, besides that, I'm gonna get back to that thought. But we usually go every winter, and we would get like a holiday picture, it would just be good for a card and to send out to families on the East Coast, and would eat, go on the rides and all of that stuff. Because personally I prefer Knott's than Disney. That's besides the point. Um, but now this year, I don't think it's worth it, even though that Knott's is kind of open,
Yeah.
because they do like their food fairs and like their culinary, like, oh, just you can walk around Ghost Town, but you can't go on the rides, but you could buy this ticket that's actually cheaper than buying a day pass for the park, and you could just eat from one section of the park to the other. And so, even though that sounds good and it sounds more or less safer than going on rides and do whatever they're doing at Disney in at least on the East Coast. But I talked to my brother about it. It's like, I don't think that's going to happen this year as much as I want to. If things were like loosey goosey, like not too bad, like August we had a spike, but like before August, like July,
Mm-hmm.
June, if it was like that, then I would have been okay. But no. but
Yeah.
but now it's not like that. Yeah.
I don't know. My personal opinions on it, right, are I think that there are certain places that it's either like you do or die, right? So if you think
Mm-hmm.
about bigger corporations like Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farm, if their parks are closed, what is their money maker, you know?
Yeah.
Especially with like Knott's, because Knott's doesn't necessarily have like a movie studio like
Yeah.
Disney does, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, for certain places it's become a thing of like what will drive customers in even though the situation is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I know uh like Disney Sea or Tokyo, what is it called, Disney Sea, Tokyo Sea, whatever.
Yeah. Disney
um
Tokyo Sea. Yeah.
yeah, in Japan, they actually, it seems like they do a lot of precautions for the park itself.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, it is at like a lower capacity of like people coming into the park and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But even today, I had a conversation with my boss, and my boss was saying how they reopened Main Street or something like that. Like it was either downtown Disney or Main Street, something like that.
Mhm.
And they're like YouTubers who talk about it, right? And they're like, "Oh, there's so little people, it's fine." And there was just a whole bunch of people at the park, you
Mhm.
know. And so I think it's kind of a combination of like companies are trying to do things to gain revenue, and also there are just a whole bunch of people who are stuck not really being able to do anything. And so to have, I feel like at some level, like there will be a point where there will be people who are like, I've done nothing for so long, I have to do something. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's still kind of worrisome to me, at least, that there is such like a big spike of COVID coming up. And I'm pretty sure with all of the stuff that's happening now, like there will be more cases by the end of January or beginning of January. So
Yeah, the way things are trending and the million MAGA march without a mask.
I
Oh my god.
so I do know some supporters of Trump. I don't know how far into it they are in comparison to like whether or not they support like the MAGA march and whatnot, but
Yeah.
I um I saw like some things today about the MAGA march and like the numbers they were reporting, and I also saw like there's a riot going on in DC from the Proud Boys, and there are Trump supporters who are tearing down, you know, Black Lives Matter posters that protesters have put up on like this gate next to the White House. And I'm just like, I knew something was gonna happen, but this still gives me a headache.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's just you're tired. You're like, oh God.
Before we leave the conversation about theme parks, yeah, I do. It is. It sucks that Disney can't open to some degree. Like as an audience member, as somebody that's like tangentially, I'm like okay with Disney parks. Um, but on a human level, on the level of like, there's people of whom that I kind of know, on a mutual friend basis because of my brother that works in Disneyland, and some of them are furloughed. And so like I do understand that's if the parks can't open, they can't work, and if they can't work, who else is going to pay them? So
It's
that
definitely a tough time.
that is a hardship that if you're an elected official, you got to not reconsider, but you got to consider, because Knott's has open, they're not a Disneyland, so, and they're not Six Flags, but they know what their niche is, and then they said, okay, then we're just gonna serve food,
Hmm.
and that's what we're gonna do. And so they got a chance to open. I don't. They're in a completely different city than Anaheim, and they're although they're in the same county, but for whatever reason, Disney gets a harder look for whatever reason, and that kind of sucks. But at the same time, it's like, is it worth getting sick? I don't know. I guess you as the individual need to make that assessment for themselves. I'm not here
Mm.
to assume anything because like ultimately is if you really need to, and also at the same point, Disney doesn't pay people a lot either way. So, and the cost of living, is kind of exorbitant around those parts. So it is more of a passion job. So
Let me ask you this:
go on.
if it got proposed, would you be a proponent for a heavy lockdown, like close down everything back to when we first had COVID in the first place, like
If
no
you yeah,
outdoor seating, all that stuff?
if it was at the very beginning, then I would probably say yes. I think the thing is now, which I of which that I've recognized, the fact that we've really haven't done too much on a federal level to really assess this. And it's almost to a point that it's kind of awkwardly in a weird cultural conversation too, with like mask wearing and things like that. I don't know if a lockdown would be the best thing. I think objectively in my mind, thinking about it as what scientists would obviously think about. I think Michael Osterman, one of the Biden, I think doctors that's in his task force, proposed like a lockdown. Um, I think the conversation of a lockdown needs to come with some more stuff added to it. Maybe an emergency UBI or financial relief, because just saying lockdown, I don't think would be just a good idea.
Mm.
There got to be something with it now at this point. And we do know a little bit more. I don't know. I think I might be rambling a bit. We do know a little bit more about this disease. Not a lot that I could feel comfortably not wearing a mask in public, but enough to where I could probably get groceries and do some
Yeah.
recreation stuff. But in terms of a lockdown, your question, I don't know at this current moment would be a good idea. It has to come with other earmarks and other things that makes it possible for people to have a living, because it's it's currently tough. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people unemployed. The unemployment plus up is gone. Um, the eviction moratorium, although on paper sounds good, a lot of those people have to pay that back. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
once January 31st turns into January 1st, people will have to pay those landowners and the people that own these apartment buildings back. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of tough um decisions that needs to be made. um and I think I'm amongst two camps. I can see if that a lockdown would benefit, but I also see now it's just gone. We're too far away from that lockdown conversation.
Mm.
What do you think before I
Mm.
start rambling? Yeah.
Honestly, I think I would support having another lockdown. Granted, that would be in the case of like having
Mhm.
some sort of relief for people, like monetarily, whether it became like living situations. And I'm a firm believer in that. I don't believe Trump did enough
Mhm.
for any person to survive through the first lockdown in the first place. And he did put in a stimulus package, but with so much things that happened, I genuinely believe that he could have done more in order
Mhm.
to provide relief for people. And
Yeah.
um, in the past couple of months, we've had outdoor seating and a lot of other things that are put in place that were for COVID. And while I think it's okay now, which I've done like the outdoor seating like a good amount of times now and all that. And I've always been wearing masks, washing it, sanitizing my hands, all that stuff. I do believe that if I really look back at the past couple of months, it's felt like to me, he didn't put enough effort into help. And like if there is a Trump supporter who listens to this, they could disagree with me, but I personally, from my own standpoint, feel like he could have done so much more to help. And
Mhm.
at some point, it just seemed like it didn't even matter to him anymore that all of these people were suffering, and he was just in his glass palace, just chilling.
Mhm.
And even with his new his new briefing that he did this past week with the talking about the Operation Warp Speed, which, by the way, is the most interesting name I've ever heard for an operation.
Yeah.
Like, why, why is it? I mean, I understand the warp speed, but I've never heard of something that's so like simplified.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, just obviously, which is very like, interesting. But even when he was talking about like that, right? Like it didn't even feel like he cared then either, right? Because it was
Mm-hmm.
like he was talking about how Pfizer, I don't,
Pfizer.
yeah, came up with the a possible vaccine, and
Mm-hmm.
how the US had paid so and so amount of money, but it wasn't really them paying for their research. It was just paying so that we could get the tests when they were produced and whatnot. And to me, it, like, I genuinely believe that it doesn't really feel like he cares all that much, except for what his name entails.
Mm-hmm.
And um if there was more put in place, like under the Biden administration, if and when, hopefully when that goes through,
Yeah.
I think as long as he had some sort of like parachute to catch people in certain situations, I think a lockdown would be really good. And
Yeah.
um, for sure, I think if Trump had enforced a stricter lockdown, as much as people would be kind of like against it, I think it would have helped a lot. But granted, the one caveat that we have now that we didn't have at the beginning um, of when COVID hit was we didn't have a lot of people who didn't believe that COVID didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So the one downside to enforcing a strict lockdown would be, I don't think a, like a group of people would believe in it anymore and would just go out and do anything anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think now that to some degree, I think COVID fatigue is across the board. I think regardless of who you are, what your politics are. At the very beginning of this podcast, we were talking about like how it's like where it's not that we don't want it to be over, it's just that we just kind of miss the tiny things in life. But
Basically
like
getting like cabin fever.
yeah, a bit. I think we all get cabin fever. I do have a friend that like lives nearby, and I was like, "Hey, man, been in the you've been in a house for like a whole weekend? You good?
You
You
okay?
good? You want some fresh air?" But yeah, so it's like I totally understand. It's I I think we're both in agreement that if there were to be a lockdown, it has to come with a lot of caveats and a lot of like support. And given what this administration gave out, I was feeling like, yeah, I think this is good. And then once April turned into May, and when May turned into June, and June turned into July, and like all onward and forwards, it's like, $1,200 that's just gone.
Yeah.
And like there's been no relief, and I'm not gonna be like, yay Democrats for not taking the deal and stuff like that, but like there there's just like there's all of this happening, all of this death, all of this stuff, and I feel like there's a bunch of people playing politics with people's lives, and it's kind of icky. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
I, I
I
I don't know what's the proper words here without cussing my head off, but like it just feels
not even people.
troubling. Yeah, that when politics, you kind of played the game since like, for me, not being really conscious until about like what 08, and then all the way up to now. You would think like, okay, this is emergency circumstance. People that are in elected offices will do something to get this done. And then this existential crisis of a pandemic really threw a wrench. On top of that, we've had the president that really, let's just say, very divisive. And on top of that, an election year. So I'm just like thinking, if a pandemic would have come at the worst time, this probably would be the worst time.
It's funny too, because
Yeah.
if you think about it, Trump had two previous presidents who had playbooks for a pandemic incident, and
Mm-hmm.
almost everything they outlined he didn't follow.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like multiple videos and stories about George Bush reading about, I think, the Spanish flu. I think that was what
Yeah.
it was. And being so traumatized by what the book said, he started immediately planning for an event like that to happen. And an event like that happened, and the response was horrible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I genuinely think if there was a sense of like being genuine, I think I would have been much more okay with it. And I guess it's maybe me being a little bit biased because this is very much in tune with what I feel about the current situation and not
Right.
very much like a policies type of situation. But um, I don't know. This administration did not resonate with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of the things that they enacted and a lot of things they supported and a lot of things in hindsight that have happened have made me much more against this administration. And um, I will say though, I think there is one benefit to having Trump as a president, and that's the worst thing I will ever say that comes out of my mouth.
Okay, go on.
But it's kind of like a backhanded comment. I think
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that having Trump is a benefit for is that it made a lot of younger um, adults within my age range much more aware of what is going on in politics.
Right.
Like I do feel like for younger people to be much more involved with government and politics, there has to be some kind of catalyst. And for a long time, I feel like aside from like maybe 9/11 or something like that, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, a lot of my time growing up has been kind of, it felt like a peace period.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know if you could say the same for yourself, but it could have been that I was so young that I never really recognized it, but it always felt like very okay. Like it didn't really, politics never really rung or gave me like anything that I felt like I needed to know off the top of my head. But with this administration that got put in, I felt much more inclined to keep myself very informed with the information that was coming in, and learning about the stuff that's happening, learning about some of the like political people that are in government that are advocating for certain things, advocating for other things that I might oppose, and just being much more knowledgeable about a lot of political events that have happened. And I
Yeah.
think I'm
Yeah. I was
much
gonna
more
say.
aware. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great.
Backhanded
Especially.
comment is a backhanded
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah. It is. In its way. Yeah. You're kind of right. It brought people into a political spectrum where I don't think many people would think of themselves. You know, that they would undertake. And I think
Hmm.
I've had a few guests on that ran for specific offices that either mentioned it on the podcast or mentioned it in private is like, well, what was one of the main catalysts for them to be in office. And then some of them said, it I don't think they said it was Trump, but it was just like they saw something in the direction of this country and said, this is not the best direction. And I'm not I don't want to be a passive player in this conversation of like what I can do for my community. And so for a
Right.
lot of them, they took that stride to be part of the community, to be the policy leaders and things like that. And I kind of commend that, like I don't I don't necessarily see myself as something like that. I don't know, maybe in the future or anything like that, but it takes a lot to not just be a forum writer, blogger, or anything like that, but actually be kind of I know some people might hate this analogy, but kind of boots on the ground, really, really getting into the idea of politics and, doing the work versus being a passive player or not, you know, getting in those elected offices or um things. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And for folks, and at the very base level, you don't have to be an elected official. You could be a volunteer, or you could be an electorate that actually goes deep down these policies and say like, oh, do I really, really like support that? Or do I
Mhm.
really, really want a $15 minimum wage? Do I really, really want, to decriminalize all drugs and stuff like that? Those things are absolute questions that people need to dive into on a personal way and on a constructive way, because those, when you tell to somebody, it's like, don't discriminate our students for Prop 16. Don't discriminate. And I was like, okay, you're telling me this fear of like racism and things like that, but what are we really talking about here? Oh, it's affirmative action. What is affirmative action? Oh, it's like one of these ways to try to help communities that historically been disadvantaged to get to college. Okay, so why are the people calling it a racist thing? And so actually deep diving it, you can make that same argument with what Oregon did with decriminalizing all drugs and saying
Yeah.
like, listen, like, we've had this war on drugs since the 70s, since Nixon, and it didn't brought safety in our communities. It brought more crime. It brought this prison industrial complex. It brought communities that's been disadvantaged for generations to stay disadvantaged, and there's no idea of restorative justice.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
I think in the future, I think I've mentioned this before. I've thought about becoming an educator.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the future, if I ever did become a teacher, and seeing as where I would have wanted to teach, it would have been in the high school level. If I were to teach seniors in high school, I think I probably would do what my one of my college professors did with me,
Mm-hmm.
which was I think, oh god, it was probably like during the midterm elections, I think. When
2018.
Yeah, right when we were
Yeah.
nominating all of the potential candidates. And
Yeah.
one of my professors in college, they made like entire day specifically for discussing like what the propositions were about, because she made like PowerPoints to do research for all the propositions, talked about all the candidates, and that election made it a lot easier for me to understand what I was looking at, because a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
terminology on the ballots can be very confusing if you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Case in point, Prop 22.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think if I were like a teacher for high school seniors, I think I would want to do something similar, because they would have been 18, which is the age to vote, I think, right? 18 is
Yeah, 18 is the age to vote, and in California and in several other states, you can register day of.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So,
think I personally, as just a way to get people to be more inclined to like know about more about their like political situations and whatnot, I would feel like I would want to educate students on what was happening in that particular election for whatever year it was. I think if I had um, a teacher who had told me about it in high school, I think I would have been much more inclined to vote. Though I did vote. I did. um, I like unintentionally have been voting since I was 18, which I never thought that was going to be a thing, but I guess it was a thing now. So
well, I think that's a good thing, because if you're a younger voter, it means you're gonna be a more chances of you being a lifelong voter.
right. But you know what?
Yeah.
I think part of it was because the okay, this is the only quote I for some reason that's going through my head. So John Oliver said it last week, right? He was like something about like for some reason, right? It
Mm-hmm.
just Donald Trump is it's like Home Alone. Donald Trump is always in the middle somehow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I know where
Uh,
that quote is coming from. Yeah.
yeah. So I remember specifically when I was younger and I first voted, it was against I think it was picking the candidates. And then after that it was the presidential candidates. And my first one was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So and obviously Donald Trump won, so that was a day.
Yeah. I know. I remember going to college that day too.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting. And but like it's funny to think that like, you know, I felt like a kind of a wave of sadness
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And you know, I think I can at least at like the bottom level sympathize with Trump supporters in the sense that they probably feel very upset that Trump lost.
Yeah.
In fact, it's enough that they're in denial. So they're in stage what of the sadness.
The grieving state, like
There you go.
the
Yeah.
yeah, of the grieving model.
They're
Yeah,
currently
he's
in denial
not. They haven't
to the
got to the
highest degree.
acceptance. They haven't
Yeah.
got to the acceptance yet.
Yeah. So I I remember feeling that like the sadness and grief, but I think it comes from a very different place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because immediately when he got elected, he enacted the travel ban. Was that
Yeah,
what it was called?
the Muslim travel ban.
Right.
Yeah,
And I don't know that or I knew that something crazy was going to happen already. Like I felt it, and as
yeah,
soon as that happened, I was just like, oh, there's the first one. And so um something always made me feel kind of like antsy about it. As the 4 years have gone on, you know, there's been so much that has happened, and I don't know if it ever occurred to you, but um, I was like the pessimist in my head was saying like, you know, he's targeted so many people of color. When is it going to
hmm,
be my turn? When is it going to be like my race? You know, and
yeah.
coronavirus hit, and I was like, dare
There
it.
it is.
And you
Oh
know,
my god. Yeah.
there were a lot of times where he during that time mentioned like calling the coronavirus a lot of derogatory terms,
Yeah.
and even like at the briefing he called or whatever he called it the China virus instead of
Mm-hmm.
coronavirus. So I was just like
The China plague. It's just all of these names. Yeah.
right. So it's you know like as much as I can say that I was super I was pretty upset when Hillary Clinton lost.
Mm-hmm.
um I think I would have been even more depressed seeing as how his 4 years have gone and just how many things he's said as like a political face to just kind of demean people of color when we live in the United States, which is known for immigration,
Yeah.
you know? So,
And it's also crazy that there are communities of color that do kind of toe that line. And like you probably know family, I do know family that are kind of very conservative in their mindsets. There are some that just kind of like, they're conservative ancillary or tangent, because I think they just kind of like have a very passive role in politics, where they all like it. The most passive thing you could do is only vote during presidential elections and then barely understand any propositions. And so that's like the bare minimum that of some of these communities of color, like, get at, especially in the older community. But I just like Orange County for Trump, and like the Vietnamese for Trump, and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
so
but 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 it comes from somewhere. And oh, sorry. just real quick, it comes from somewhere, and I don't know if you want to dive into this, but we're both Southeast Asian, right? You're
I'm technically Chinese, but my parents were born in Vietnam, even though they are also Chinese.
Yeah, I think my mom can claim that too, because I think, I think ethnically Chinese, but
Born
also
in Cambodia?
but born in Cambodia. I think my dad is like, he knows for sure. He's like, yeah, totally Cambodian. But I think my mom's like, that's why we have like Chinese heritage, and we
Mm,
observe Chinese holidays too. So
yeah.
so that's why. But like for some to some degree, it's like I think because of the Southeast Asian immigration and like the reasons why certain groups came over to the United States, they tend to be more conservative. I think for some people, it's because of those things, those reasons why they lean towards that. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not here to change like what my parents to change my parents' mind or change my uncle's minds. I'm only here to do what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to my advice for talking about politics and Thanksgiving, is not just to not talk about it, but just kind of infer. It's just like, how could you not talk about politics,
Yeah.
giving it's 2020 and like all of this shit is happening? Like, I feel like you can't really avoid it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, just kind of infer and just like listen, because in my case, I don't have a lot of family that like kind of like we don't have that echo chamber where we all kind of vote in the same way. We're in the same headwinds, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But but because we have that conflict, I feel like it made me a better listener to some degree, and
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just kind of like, okay, well, these are the reasons why a group of people of color that would idolize an individual that would kind of lie and cheat his way into office. But that's kind of another point. Are we talking about the politics now? I think we've been talking about
We've
politics.
slowly shifted.
I think we've slowly shifted as we always do on this podcast.
It's okay. It's
Yeah,
normal, right?
I think that's part of having a conversation too. But
Yeah.
anyways, I think just to kind of get an update, yeah, we finally get President elect Joe Biden, which is
I'm
also
okay.
very good, because I was thinking like, I'm gonna ignore the polls, I'm gonna do my duty, I'm gonna vote for the propositions. I made sure as many people in my family and my immediate family, they can vote. And so we voted. um for me, I was being optimistic, but I also have a chance, of pessimism, because it's hard to dethrone an incumbent, president. That's often tough. So my head going in, and I don't know if I mentioned this at the previous podcast. It's just like, I kind of thought that we might get another 4 years of Trump, because the numbers aren't great for a challenger to be in the office for a one-term president. Um, but yeah, we got we got Biden. We voted. Our voices have collectively said no, but it was close. It was very close at the
um
end. You still have 70 million Trump voters.
yeah, I feel so discouraged that so many more people didn't denounce the things that he was doing. And
Yeah,
I, like I've mentioned in previous podcasts, I know people who are Trump supporters, and I have a lot of people, within my inner circle who voted for Trump over Biden. Well, yeah, who voted for Trump over Biden. And um I okay, let me preface this. So I've had conversations with my dad,
okay.
and my dad considers himself much more Republican than he does Democrat.
Yeah.
But he said, I remember I went on a walk with him, and he was telling me, right, like, personally I believe in a lot more things that probably are more Republican, but like, could we just have like a Republican Party that just isn't under this guy?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think in recent days, I've seen a lot of things about John McCain pop up, and he passed a little while ago, but a lot of people
Yeah.
did see him as a very good person of character. And like I've mentioned, right, it kind of pains me to think that there are that many people who are willing to overlook the amount of racism and um just like hatred that he's instilled in a lot of the people in the United States. And maybe for all it could have been always there, just hidden under their surface.
Right.
And him just being president and not denouncing certain organizations have just made it much more acceptable to be able to say those things. And I personally wish that there were more people that overlooked the policies of Republicans to realize how much like bad things that Trump has put into the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even currently right now, this current idea that he's calling it a scam, and there's all of these Republican individuals that are kind of like coming to his side and things like that. And I would just think, I watched this program called The Hill, and they were speculating, oh, the reason why these Republicans are saying like, oh yeah, Mr. President, it was a fraud. Yeah, and don't concede this presidency is because that in January there's a runoff election in Georgia. And I was just like thinking, it's like, well, can't you find another way of doing that without
Yeah.
like baiting this president into a coup?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is there a better way than and I'm not trying to say, F Trump and just, leave him by the wayside or whatever. Just be like, you know, listen, Mr. President, this is probably the worst thing you could do right now. But, if you want Georgia to win during the runoffs, maybe this not is a good idea right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the ideal situation, I think that would be the best thing to happen, right? But
Yeah.
that kind of hinges on Trump being willing to do that. And I don't think, excuse my language, his ego is small enough to be doing that.
Yeah. No.
And I don't know, the fact that he's not willing to concede, like respectfully, I think is indicative of what he would have been like behind the scenes with his administration. And
Yeah.
I'm not in the administration, so I can't really say anything, and everything that I'm saying is just speculation, obviously. But if I had to speculate about how his administration is working, I think that he's filled it with just yes men. I don't think he
Yeah.
has anyone who really opposes him. And for all I know, right, there are probably Republican senators that are out there who do oppose Trump, but the more vocal ones are obviously the ones that kind of condone and let the things that he decides to do pass. And I think that's very problematic, especially when he's doing a lot of things that I personally would feel like doesn't necessarily identify with the Republican Party and what image they would like to portray to the people. But granted, I could be wrong, because
Yeah.
there's so,
Yeah.
there's so many people that voted for him. And even after, there's everything that's been happening, now it's crazy to think that like he's potentially forcing a coup,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just, you wouldn't think that it would happen here, but also like it's happening here. And it feels like one of those, like you're staring at it, right? And you're staring at everything that's happening and everything's on fire, and you're like, I'm trying to put this fire extinguisher to this fire, but it just keeps getting bigger and nothing is happening.
Yeah.
So
It's the worst thing to realize.
the building's on fire, everything is on fire, I'm fine.
Yeah. dude.
Yeah.
It's it's just been a journey. These
Yeah.
past 4 years have been a journey. Sorry.
Just looking back.
Yeah, I'm
Ah.
looking back. I think it was about 2016 when he got elected. I was about what, third or fourth year into college. I wasn't gonna be ready to graduate until what, fall semester of 2017.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, I think I was there for the first year of Trump's you know,
I was
shit
in like
show.
my sophomore year of college.
Yeah. We were there for the whole shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and oh my god, I just think about the times about working in the community, in the sense that we've had this president say so much stuff, and I think at least I can infer what my students have felt, that, your comment about, okay, well, which minority is going to be this year, this month, or this week, or this day. And with the crazy thing about the San Gabriel Valley, it's much more diverse than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's not just Southeast Asian, East Asian. It's like there's more to that, like the generic, like Vietnamese, Chinese. There's also Japanese, Korean. Apparently there's some exchange students that came from Korea, which is very interesting given the timetable. They're probably thinking, it's like, why did I came over here? Um, the other places like Mexico, but not just like Mexico. It's like Guatemala, Colombia,
Mhm.
Venezuela, and so it's like it's been more diverse. And so like I've had students kind of been like talking to me about like how they kind of feel, and these students, they have a good sense of, like, they could just say it, like what they're feeling. And so some of them just feel unsafe to some degree, especially the newer immigrant community that come to the US. They're just like, I just kind of want to not explore my background and just pretend to be white, and so I could just go through school. I
Mhm.
think that's the feeling of the conversation, where they just want to erase themselves a little bit, just to conform to this new US identity.
Yeah.
And that kind of sucks a little bit too. I don't know where I stand with that, but
Well, I feel like an unspoken problem of a lot of just immigrant kids or just kids that are born from immigrants in general is
yeah.
just feeling kind of like a mixture of not necessarily fitting in, right?
Yeah.
Like personally, I am, I come from parents who were Chinese, born in Vietnam, but I obviously did not grow up there.
Hmm.
And my Chinese is subpar. My
Yeah.
Mandarin, no, not my Mandarin. My Cantonese is subpar, and my Mandarin is non-existent. And so I feel like luckily, growing up in the area that we live in, it kind of doesn't make you think of yourself as a minority.
Hmm.
With so many different groups of Asians around, you just kind of feel like, yeah, I'm just myself, right?
Yeah.
But when you leave this area and go out into different places, you deal with certain things that make you kind of question yourself as a person, because it boils yourself down to an identity that you can't really escape from,
Yeah.
especially if you're not white passing for certain races. Like my little cousin, um, if you were to put him and me side by side, I obviously am very much Asian because of my facial features, but he would be considered white passing
Hmm.
as a half, like a half white, half Asian kid. And so I think like as much as like kids like that have problems with their identity, I think kids who are kind of like us also kind of have that same identity problem whenever we're growing up, because it's a matter of like how do I stay true to my heritage and the life that my parents grew up with while growing up in an area or place that is completely different from the area that my parents grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think there is a certain like an Americanized culture. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but um I think especially with this administration and just a lot of rhetoric that has been put out, there will be many more times from now on into the future, forever, however long we go on for, where people that look like us, not even that look like us, but look even maybe a little bit different, will be boiled down to just how their facial features look like, how their
Mm-hmm.
skin color looks like. And it's partially a shame because obviously, like some of your students have mentioned, sometimes they just want to come here and forget that they were ever born in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I find that sad as well. But also, I think, you know, um, if I had a chance to tell kids who thought of that something,
Mm-hmm.
is I think, you should be very proud of how you look like.
Yeah.
And, just because you look different and, you may sound different, that doesn't make you any less of an American than the next person that's next to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about conforming, I guess, to an American identity, and it can be from any way. You could see if you could probably move in and live next to a very conservative family, and so as you grow up, or like as the immigrant family, you're just like, okay, well, I'll follow his idea or their idea of what an American is. And then if by happenstance you live in a very democratic area, it's like that's how they view America and things like that. And I've always had this notion, and I've always told students in this way, and when we're talking about race in America, and we do talk a little bit about social issues and things like that. And I say, as immigrants, you kind of inherit all that history of America, both good and bad. Those things all exist in the United States. And the reason why I bring this up is because when the whole George Floyd thing happens, I think there's kind of like a idea of anti-blackness that I feel like some Asian communities kind of bought into because of the model minority myth. And there's power to that. There's power in anti-blackness. I highly recommend this podcast called WUT, and they had this episode on anti-blackness. And I think a lot of policies and a lot of like communities of colors that brought up in the United States from the ending of slavery up until now, they view themselves to make sure, how can I not make myself look black? I think I think I think in immigrant communities, it's like, where are the power structures, where are they at, and how can I conform, and so that's an easy way to kind of assimilate to American society, to
Mm-hmm.
see the power structures and say, okay, well, they don't believe that people should have the choice to make decisions over their bodies. So that's what the power structure is. Okay, I'm going to follow that. Or they don't believe in same sex marriage or same sex rights. Okay, well, that's where the power structures are. Okay, I'm going to follow that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be also the color of your skin too. So, like, if the power structures say, hey, you look too dark for this, or like your pigment of your skin is too dark, so you got to bleach your skin, or your eyes are too slanted, so therefore you need to get like eyelid surgery. And it's not like a blatant thing, it's like a subconscious thing. You see it every single day. You see,
Mm-hmm.
in the case of the eyelid thing, you see so many people in Korea doing it, so, and it's born out of this Eurocentric idea of how people should look like in a European ideal.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get at is like there is some pride, people should keep within their immigrant community. And how, like, I think the difficulty is how we're gonna translate that in an American identity that both can be of an immigrant community and both can be quintessentially American.
Yeah. To go back to your anti-blackness comment, I do see that a lot in Asian communities. There's like that whole thing where there was like a thing that I read back then where it was talking about how if you're Asian and you're light skinned, it's a sign of royalty, because a lot of the people who were considered royal only really stayed within the palace confines, so they didn't really get tan. But workers who had to work in the fields always had to go out, and they would get tan because of the sunlight. So I think that became like a sign of your wealth if you were pale in certain cultures and stuff like that. And as I've kind of grown older and have gone further into the discourse of anti-blackness, it's interesting to see it pop up in so many different communities, even including Black communities, and how there are a lot of people who are considered light-skinned who are much more you know considered to be more attractive than people who have very dark skinned
Yeah.
pigments and stuff like that. And um anti-blackness is such a hard discussion to talk about, because part of it is trying to change what people considered as the status quo, which is whiteness, I guess. And to kind of turn it all the way around, I guess, like with the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of people who are on the opposition of Black Lives Matter see Black Lives Matter as a immediate kind of like rebuttal to, like, oh well, then white lives don't matter then if you're advocating for this movement, stuff like that, which they kind of forget that Black Lives Matter advocates for essentially like everybody, but specifically the systematically oppressed in the entire country, the most systematically oppressed. And even as an Asian American, right, like you mentioned, there are well, Asians basically have the model minority myth, where that separated us further from people POC communities, because there was kind of like this I don't know if it was kind of like sense of conforming, if that makes any sense, that comes from like, that seems to come from Asian communities, and they're like, well, if look what they can do, why can't you do that type thing, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of made a divide within like communities of color. And I think as Asians, you have to advocate against, or well, there is a sense of privilege being Asian, but you have to advocate for other communities of color that are considered to be more disparaged than your own community. And that includes, I think, the Black Lives Matter movement, because, obviously, I think it can be said very easily that Black people have been historically in the United States the most systematically oppressed people. And last week when Callie was on, we talked about Black Wall Street, and there was a bill that just came out, I think, this week, and it was saying it was kind of like an apology to this one community, and it was considered as a affluent Black community, and their homes got bombed.
Oh, was this in Philadelphia?
I don't know if it was in Philadelphia. I don't remember the location, but essentially that was the story.
Yeah.
And it's weird to think like that kind of stuff happened, but like it happened to these communities, it happened to these people, and to look turn away at that and think of it as nothing wrong is just inherently wrong and I think other people of color should advocate and discuss those type of situations
Mm-hmm.
much more openly.
I think that's the what what needs to be done in this case, and that I think newer Asian immigrants just kind of don't get, and it's probably because they don't necessarily recognize that this history of oppression that came from Chinese exclusion, the Japanese internment, and like or what happened during the Vietnam War and all of these things. Like there's not a greater sense of like this is the history of what happened, and like the intersection of what black activists and Asian activists has done together.
Yeah.
Yuri Kuchiyama was around with Malcolm X, and like and Filipino um um uh farm workers marching along Cesar Chavez. Like there was this cross pollination between cultures that were doing these things. um I don't know. Like I think part of this is Cali saying it's like people within those communities need to speak up, and like I think in terms of, and translating what she was saying with the white community, like how much can there's not a lot of in language things for Cambodians. Like I don't even know my language, but there are people in Long Beach that are really trying to do some good work, but it hasn't really been put to the forefront at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. And so
Yeah.
yeah.
No, no. I mean, I think even to the minuscule scale, right? Like if it boils down to even just like getting your parents to vote, I think that means a lot in terms of advocating. And
Yeah.
I think from like even into the future, there will be a lot of times where there will be people who are not necessarily at the forefront of the fight, who are doing a lot of work and putting in
Mm-hmm.
their own effort to make a change for the world. And obviously you've mentioned that with the Long Beach area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'll be the same for even small senators, you know, and like even like to the minuscule scale, there will be people that are fighting for change.
Yeah.
And, their fight for change may never be recognized as, as as big of a scale as like Malcolm X or, Cesar Chavez or Martin Luther King. But I think those people do are just as important as the people who have a face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people that are doing the work, and are the unsung heroes, and like the people that often to some degree get kind of put out of the history books. um uh, and this conversation is going to have to continue far beyond just this conversation.
There will
And
always be another week.
there'll always be another week, and I always tell people, it's just like, listen, it's like if you're tired of talking about race, buckle up, because this is still gonna happen regardless.
I think
It's
this conversation will be going on for a while, especially
yeah.
with what's been happening recently. It's become such a forefront topic again in
Yeah.
recent time.
So we're winding down a little bit. I'm sure that things will come up next week. Um, the president recently came out of wherever he comes out of in the White House.
Just
For
in his hole,
for
wherever that may
for
be.
Veterans Day, and I have some comments about that too. But you know, hopefully, we're gonna move on to our little last subject about anime.
Just anime for a
right
little
before
while.
we leave right before we leave so hoping we try to manage like a schedule, so maybe we could watch stuff on a Saturday and then
Hmm.
maybe try to produce something. The anime podcast may revive. um hopefully we could do finish off My Hero Academia before
Mm,
a new season of I think Violet Evergarden might be coming out in the January,
very soon.
very soon enough. And given what happened to Kyoto Animation and and all of that stuff, I think I hope for a good season, given that I'm gonna pretend to forget everything about the first season. I'm just gonna go into this next season just being like, you know what, I just want to see good stories that make me cry.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And I do want to ask you one last thing. It might be a heavy subject topic, and it might have to have another conversation later down the line. Maybe get another person that's really into anime to talk about this.
I'll do a
I
layman's term answer.
Yes. Or we could just have like a layman's conversation. Who
Well,
knows? As I guess you're eating squid,
I am eating.
fish. Oh, fish snacks. Nice.
Oh, I realize it's fish snacks. Snacks.
Snacks. Fish
Oh my God.
snacks.
A little hungry.
I thought it was squid.
It is not. It is. I don't know
It's
what kind of fish this is.
you don't even know.
Hold on. It is fish. It says lizard fish, croaker, Alaskan pollock.
Okay. You got that from a Costco or something?
I feel like this was at an Asian supermarket. I almost made these slip out of the bag. Did you,
Oh
did you
no.
see this?
Oh no.
Anyway,
Anyway, yeah.
I've eaten so many bags of this over break. I have not stopped.
Oh god. I gotta know where you get that so I could try it.
It's at you can get it at an Asian supermarket.
Okay, I'll look out for that. Anyways, so I mentioned this podcast called What, and it's WUT period. And
Hmm?
it's a very good podcast. It's about two people bringing into two topics that they want to talk about per episode. And one of the episodes was about Japanese mascots, and there was something in this podcast conversation that they talked about was that there was this they were talking about how there's differences between how you know how like travel companies would talk about places, right? And like it would, as they would say, it's like, oh, if you were to travel to England, like the travel brochures would be all about like walk amongst the white cliffs of Dover and drive through the metropolitan, like like London, and go shopping and things like that. But when Westerners seem to talk about Japan, it's almost like in such a way where it's like there's like this infantilizing kind of like, it's like, oh well, that Japan has this kawaii culture, and everything that's also weird about Japan's culture is here in Akihabara. And so it's like, okay. And it's like it's not, it's like it's taking all the stuff that's like, it's not necessarily like Japanese history, but it's more like kind of like Japanese stereotypes, I guess, or like the ideas of like anime Japanese schoolgirls, which is also 100% fucking creepy. And like all these other things where like people just kind of have these notions of Japan. Is it kind of weird? Like, have you ever noticed that where like within doing parts of the anime podcast, you're kind of like, I like this Japanese culture, and I like diving into anime, but like at what point does it seem like it's like an infantilization of a culture versus like really diving into a culture's history?
Mm,
Have you ever thought about that? I don't know. It's been in my mind for a little bit, and maybe I'm overthinking something. Maybe there's more to it, and also we're not Japanese, we don't want to assume anything here either. So
Mm,
have you ever thought about this?
well, personally speaking, I have thought about it in some ways, but not
Mm-hmm.
others. Um, Specifically, I usually think about it in terms of anime
Mm-hmm.
versus cartoons,
Right.
which is the argument that, a lot of people who don't really watch anime or don't really know anime see it as, just kid something for kids. And
Right.
in the when it gets westernized, most of the popular things that gets westernized are animes that are somewhat more, when they get translated, seem more for kids. For
Right.
example, there's like Pokemon, there's uh Yu-Gi-Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yu-Gi-Oh in Japan is apparently a lot crazier than Yu-Gi-Oh in America.
Okay.
But actually, like, legitimately, that is a thing. You need to look it up if you haven't. But yeah, it's like, I think in Western countries, right, we often associate, for some reason, like, things that have that look to be for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously that's kind of the narrative is experimenting with the medium. Case in point, there's like that the one rated R Muppet movie. There's also the rated R Batman cartoon that came out,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of weird, right? Because when we think of when we think of cartoons, right, a lot of times we think about like the old school Saturday morning cartoons that you would turn on as a kid, or when you would come back from school. I mean, no kid knows this now because fucking TikTok. Oh, excuse my language.
Yeah. Well, I
But
it's a podcast. It doesn't matter.
I'm just anyway. So yeah, even like my childhood was like me getting back from school, sitting in front of the TV and watching cartoons until like an hour later, and I'd go and do my homework. And I don't think you know a lot of Westerners realize that like there are a whole bunch of animes out there that are, they're considered as primetime TV, and
Mm-hmm.
they watch it in the slots that we would have, like CSI Miami or some shit like that.
Yeah. Game of
So
Thrones.
yeah, exactly. But I feel like a lot of people who dabble on the surface level of anime don't realize that there are animes out there that are just as brutal as Game of Thrones,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And um even then, right? Like there are certain things, to go back to the infantilizing thing. There are certain things that do kind of make me a little bit
It's like this is
like
uncomfortable.
you mentioned school.
Yeah.
Specifically for me, it's the schoolgirl outfits and lollies. I don't do lollies.
Yeah. That's
Let me explain. Lollies, I believe, are girls who are a lot older who look super young.
there was also this thing called like moe or like or like this idea of like a bunch of anime dudes like really gushing over like high school
Yeah,
girls, and I'm just like, you realize they're kids, right? And like this
yeah. There are some
anime,
things.
yeah, that's just kind of like,
Yeah, it kind
yeah,
of makes you think about it a little bit, But
yeah.
uh, well, here, let me ask you a quick question.
Go
So
ahead.
when you talk about like the infantilization of Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what specifically are you referring to when it comes to their culture? Like, are you saying that we infantilize it and boil it down to just people dressing kawaii and only, weebs,
In
versus like understanding the historical significance?
yeah, it's going to that like the in this weird way, what people kind of like know about Japan is usually like these stereotypes, and I feel like, there's other ways that, other cultures kind of get it too, like Thailand, like if for certain people it's kind of a haven for sex work, for some people, and like sexploitation of individuals that live there, and and I think it's not looking at a country deeper than what you see on the surface, in terms of what they produce on a cultural level and like what they produce on the outside, you know. And I don't
Let
think
me
that.
ask you a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Go finish your statement, then
Oh,
I'll ask a
okay.
question.
Yeah, like to see a culture more than than just these kind of bare bones ideas. And I feel like in Western
Hmm.
cultures, I feel like there's not a one sense of like how they captured Asian culture in the best way and in the
Hmm.
best form. I think that Japan has this kind of like techno cyberpunk anime moe kawaii situation. Korea has this K-pop kind of like tinge in a pastel color palette, and like places like Taiwan and Hong Kong are set to the tone of John Woo and like these the idea is like, oh, this is the Hollywood of the Orient, or they would call the Orient. But I don't know. It just seems weird. I'm only bringing this up because it's like it's been kind of like a topic I've been diving into, like these podcasts that have been talking about like facts and like different stories. But it's just kind of weird that I never really noticed that like how much of what I understand of a country comes from um like this idea that I'm looking at it only because of X and not because I want to learn more about their culture or 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 what history they has. Hello. Hello.
Hello, you're
Oh,
back.
I think I had a bump in my. Did you get my conversation there? My at the end? No.
I didn't hear it.
No.
Could you see me?
I saw you, but it started
I
like
died.
it started like this robot talk, and I was just like, oh wait, is she there or not?
I could not hear it.
No. Oh no.
But no, but you did answer my question, which was, do you feel like the same thing is happening in places like Korea? That was what my
Yeah.
question was going to be.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's like I'm
yeah.
still gonna enjoy anime. I'm still gonna like um I'm still gonna like watch films and all of these things, but yeah, it's just kind of open this door of like, okay, well, like I just think I need to also understand more of a culture instead of like only seeing it through one lens. Oh no. Hello, Kalani.
Hello.
Oh my god, do you want
It died.
to died again?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Oh no. Okay,
Technical
I'll make
difficulty.
I'll make my final point here. I'm gonna make my final point here. I'm just gonna say,
Okay.
I'm still gonna I'm still going to watch anime. I'm still gonna consume fiction and films and things like that. But it's like hearing about it, and I'm gonna share the essay that they shared of this idea of the infantilization of Japan and like East Asian countries. But yeah, it just kind of like open my eyes a little bit. It's just like, oh yeah, that is kind of weird a little bit,
Mhm.
that what people only see as anime, and that in itself may be a problem too, you know, on a cultural level. If it, like, it gets to a dark place in the form of like the Thailand and the Philippines, you know, where, you know, the like the sexual exploitation of like the these areas, you know. So I hope that's not the case in Japan. I'm sure to some degree it's probably there, but I think for me it's like, you know, I'm just going to be a little bit more conscious of it, of that idea of
Oh,
like, yeah.
I'm gonna make one comment really quick before this internet dies again. But
Yeah.
um, personally, right, to end it on a more hopeful note,
Mhm.
you know, there can be instances of infantilizing a culture as the way that, you know, that podcast mentioned and the way that we've been talking about it. But I do firmly believe that there are a good portion of people, like the same thing that happened with me, which it started off with an interest and then it led to like education on that culture
Mhm.
because of that interest was so strong that I wanted to know more. And I've done very similar with Korea and Japan in terms of their culture. Granted, I will say that I'm not that 100% knowledgeable personally speaking, but maybe that's just because it's me and I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think for a lot of people, getting interested in things like anime, granted, maybe not the schoolgirls, but anime,
Yeah, as an
and, you
art
know, getting
yeah.
interested in K pop as, you know, I think can be a stepping stone for people to become more educated on the culture that these phenomenons come from. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it can lead to further education on a culture, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, you know, we probably have cases of that in like other Western nations, and like I think in terms of, you know, like New Zealand is not Lord of the Rings per se,
It's
but
pretty though.
it's pretty though, and I'm definitely would hike, but you
Sorry.
know, this I think there's more to for a country to explore in a country than just their kind of stereotypes. And I think it's like, this is not like a woke conversation. It's just kind of like, how as travelers and how as tourists can we respect individual nations and just be like, you know, there are people that live here that actually work and actually have lives, and like to be respectful of that
Mm-hmm.
as we travel. And as, you know, to some degree, I would hope to earn enough to have disposable income to go to these places too, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I would want to try to see more of, in this case, Japan, than just the anime and just that stereotype. And to my, not to blow smoke up my ass, but to to my credit and to my friends' credit, like, we also did go to other places in Japan that wasn't necessarily the stereotype, you know. You know, to some degree, we did go to the temple of like the four of the 47 Ronin. I think it was 47. Yeah, of the 47 Ronin, and you know, that was a big deal for all of the people, all the samurai geeks out there. But it was still a nice experience to kind of, you know, to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, in that note, hopefully with the technical difficulties, we've got through it. I think we've had an like a good hour. I thought it was going to be a quick update, but you know, as these things go, in terms of talking about politics, it's more than a 30-minute conversation.
It's always.
It's always is. But hopefully y'all taking care of yourselves, and having a good holiday, staying warm, staying healthy.
Go enjoy some
Um,
fish snacks.
go and enjoy some fish snacks. I'm gonna definitely try to look out for that. Probably first place I'm gonna check out is maybe H Mart. Anyways, um, so yeah, stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next podcast.